Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Um, Happy Monday. I hope that everyone had a good weekend, given all that's going on. And I wanted to talk today about incongruency in communication, um, and how you can actually improve communication and the congruency of communication by listening beyond the words. So, have you, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, like been talking to someone, right? And whether it's on the phone or whether it's in person, and they're talking to you, and maybe they're telling you about something that should be exciting. This actually happened to me personally, where I was sharing about a conversation that should have been exciting, and um, as I shared, my voice was flat, and my body language was kind of flat, and I was just sharing in this sort of monotone voice. But in essence, the actual conversation I was having was of some exciting and rather good news. And at the end of the conversation, my friend says to me, "Well, are you excited about this thing? Because it seems like that this is something you should be excited about." And what that person was doing is what I'm going to talk about today, which is one of the aspects of how one of the aspects and skills that we have in neurolinguistic programming called calibrating on behavior. So y'all know me, for those of y'all who've not been following, I am loving these days to talk about the unconscious mind, to talk about the invisible influences that are impacting our lives, our communication, our behavior, whether they're external influences, internal influences. Arguably, most of the invisible limiting influences come from the unconscious mind and how we perceive things. So that is, there are all kinds of influences in our life, but the ones that I focus on that create the most transformation that I've seen are the ones that start at the unconscious level, that start at the individual level. So we're going to be talking about more of that today. I'm an NLP, hypnosis, and timeline therapy master practitioner and trainer, as well as your NLP coach. So, I was talking about earlier that, you could be talking to someone and they could be telling you something. That this happened to me. They could be telling you something that should occur like one way, but their tone of voice, their body language, everything about them is saying something else, right? You might even have someone that is giving you good feedback, or trying to be happy for you, or praising you, but you can notice something's off in the way that you receive it, like the energy is off, right? That is a manner of your unconscious mind detecting an incongruency in the communication. Now, I'm going to talk about this on an individual scale, and then I'm going to pan it up to a more global scale towards the end. So stay with me here. So, I don't know if you all remember the show some years ago. I think it might have been almost 10 years ago by now, called Lie to Me. And, this guy, Dr. Cal Lightman, he would solve these cases, or consult on these cases with the FBI, or the police force. And he would sit people down and interview them. And he would be able to tell whether a person was telling the truth or lying by watching their body language, while watching their facial expressions and the micro expressions on their face, by listening to the inflections of the tone of voice. And I have to tell you, I used to love that show because, of course, it played into the unconscious behaviors that come out through our communication. So I don't know how many of you know this. I think by now it's a very well known fact that only 7% of communication is verbal, and the other 93% is nonverbal. So this is the unconscious, this is where the unconscious mind principle of calibrating on behavior comes in. If you really want to know how someone is feeling despite what they're saying, or if you want to know, you want to kind of get what the, not maybe the intention, but like how they're feeling beyond what they're saying, then there are a few things that you can look at. So you can listen to the tone of their voice. Is the tone of their voice matching the words that are coming out of their mouth? Right. Now, some people, of course, some people just have a particular tone of voice. They have a particular monotone tone of voice, which is why sometimes you have to calibrate the baseline. If you know a person and you know how a person is at baseline, this is why observation is so key in relationships, in interaction with people. Getting rapport or getting an alignment with people is so important, because you can assess what is their baseline communication. What is the baseline level of their communication? And once you get a person's baseline level of communication, that's like, sort of calibrating that baseline. You can begin to calibrate what's congruent and what's not congruent to the baseline, right? So you can look at, if you're listening to someone talking to you, you can listen to their tone of voice, the inflections going up, the inflections going down, the monotone nature of their voice. You can look at their facial expressions. If someone's telling you what appears to be, or what you would think would be good news, but their facial expression is flat, or they're or they're frowning, then that's an incongruency. There's something else going on behind that communication. Now, it could have to do with what they're telling you, or it could have nothing to do with what they're telling you. It's like if you ask somebody, "How are you doing?" and they say, "Fine," versus, "How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm fine." So there's a difference in the congruency of the word and the communication, if that makes sense. Type "makes sense" in the chat box if this is making sense as I'm telling you it, right? Just go ahead and type "makes sense" in the chat box if it's making sense. Body language, are they sweating? They're breathing, the velocity, or how the rapidness of their breathing. Are they doing some nervous type of body language, like tapping of the toe while they're tapping of the foot while they're talking, or tapping of their finger while they're talking? These are all levels of communication that we don't always notice, right? We don't always notice. Are they, maybe talking to you and gripping their hands, doing a repetitive gripping of the hands, or constantly, touching the face? These are all different nonverbal communications. Now, do you need to be an expert to know what all of these means in order to really calibrate on the behavior? No, absolutely not. It's just the noticing of them, so that you can actually then ask, like, "Is everything okay? Like, it seems like something's a little off. I mean, I heard what you said, but it seems like something's a little off." So, I always like to, when I am giving these types of giving these types of coaching, like, give you, well, what is the thing to do, right? What is the thing to do? So if you are talking with someone, if you are speaking with someone, and the communication that's coming out of their mouth is incongruent with the tone of voice, the body language, and you want to call that out, it just seems like something's off. And you could start with that, and that sparks a conversation. And we always talk, instead of making an assumption, because assumptions are bad news, right? Instead of making an assumption, you want to actually have conversation. And this leads me sort of to another thing, why it's important to have conversations and call out. I did a video on call out culture at the end of last week. A lot of times, when we're on social media or via text message, it's very difficult to calibrate on behavior. It's very difficult to know a person's intentions, because, again, words are only 7% of the picture. So one of the things that we want to be doing as we call out is try to get what the intention is behind the behavior. Even when you're talking to a person and something feels incongruent, you want to call it out in a very general way. Like, this seems incongruent. You seem like you should be more excited. But when we're calling people out online, there is a way that you can do it that would actually have a person open up rather than clam up and shut down. I was talking to a friend of mine, one of my committed listeners, earlier this weekend, and I was sharing with him about the call out culture video that I did and the calling out that needs to be done, that's the essential nature of it in order for the transformation to happen. And he was saying to me, one of the things we got to get is, are we calling out are we calling out from commitment, calling out to make a point, or calling out to make a difference? And, as we are reading people in their communication, as we're reading communication online, as we are endeavoring to create transformation and we're calling out, keep in your intention. Are you calling out just to make a point, or are you calling out to make a difference? And which one do you think has the longer term impact? Calling out just to make a point, or calling out to make a difference? So we want to be, and at first, when you're practicing it, it's going to look how it looks. But that's just something that I wanted to put in the realm of communication. This is all about communication at the unconscious level. Now here's another thing I want to talk about, calibrating on behavior on a larger scale, right? So we talked about the micro expressions, the micro incongruencies, but on a larger scale, if you're talking to a person or listening to a person, and the person says one thing but continues to do another. We have a lot of that happening, right? Saying one thing and doing another, or continuously denies or apologizes for the thing that they're doing, but then continues to do that thing. Then you have to take their behavior as a signal of their primary intention, right? So if a person over and over again displays incongruencies between their communication and their behavior, another way to look at calibrating on behavior is taking the behavior as a signal of the primary intention. And it's like I tell my son, my 5-year-old, I'm sorry doesn't mean I'm sorry if the behavior continues. It doesn't mean anything if the behavior continues. So as we're now moving forward in creating transformation, and we look at people's words and their actions, and the words coming out of their mouth don't always match their actions, and they don't match the actions repeatedly. So sometimes the word doesn't match the action, and you call it out to make a difference, and the person makes the correction. They make the correction, and then there is change and transformation. And then there are people who their words are incongruent with their actions, and you call it out, and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I'm going to do better. And maybe they do better for 1 second, and then they go back to old behavior, right? And they continuously go back to old behavior, and they continuously go back to old behavior. No matter how many times they say, "I'm sorry," they don't make the changes that they need to make from an unconscious level, from a core level, to be able to sustain whatever change that they say they're going to make, right? So then you have to calibrate on their behavior. You got to take their behavior as a signal of the primary intention, and then, act accordingly. All right. So there's so many ways that we can apply this principle of calibrating on behavior. The point is, and I'd love to hear more discussion about this in the comments, right? I'll leave that for discussion. The point is, when you're, the words that are coming out of people's mouths are only 7% of the communication. It's everything else that makes up the rest. it's the, from a micro level, it's the tone, it's the facial expression, it's the body language, it's that. But on a macro level, it's purely behavior. It's behavior. And if people are consistently saying one thing and displaying another physiologically, or saying one thing and doing another consistently, especially after doing the apology thing, then you want to take the behavior as the primary, as a primary signal of the signal of a primary intention. Now, y'all know I always love to give y'all something to go, some homework to do. So there's a practice that I would like you to try. So I want you to try in communication, really just not only listening to the words, but also watching everything else that's going on. Start noticing if behavior is consistent with the words that people are speaking. And then, if it's not, you can call it out. And remember, you're either calling it out to make a point, or you're calling it out to make a difference. Calling it out to make a point is simply calling it out to be right. Just being right doesn't always make the difference, right? Calling it out to make a difference is bringing it to one's attention in a way that they can hear you and they can receive and actually be willing and ready to make the change, make the difference. That's the big difference, right? It's the commitment behind the call out. Call outs are necessary, but it's the commitment behind the call out. The other thing you can do is you can actually look at some live speeches. There's a lot of them going on these days, and see if you can look at whether the words that are coming out of someone's mouth, feel consistent with the body language that they're actually displaying. All right. Like I said, it's really hard to do this on social media unless you're watching a video. It's really hard to do this over text because guess what? Words are only 7%. So I want you to just remember that as well as you move forward in this call out culture. So that's basically what I have for today. This is understanding the language of the unconscious mind and how it really works is really the key to deep transformation and really shifting the unhealthy and negative narratives that are going on, that are running our lives, that are running this country, right? And so, you might be wondering, and I always kind of leave you with this, of how you can learn more about learning the language of the unconscious mind, around learning NLP or neuro-linguistic programming. I have a free course that you can go straight to my website, drmaisha.com, and register for. And it's sort of the beginning of learning about, some of the principles of the unconscious mind. And then, of course, if you want to delve more deeply into it, if you want to actually get into the work and experience it yourself, then you can come hang out with me and Dr. Manny on July 18th for the Mind Remapping Virtual Transformation Experience 2.0. And you can do that by going to bit.ly/virtual transformations. And in that event, that's going to be a 1-day retreat experience. We're going to actually take you experientially through some of the principles that I talk about all the time. So you can really dig a little deeper into this language of the unconscious mind, how it affects you personally, and how you can begin to create a new narrative for yourself so that we can begin to collectively create new narratives for our culture, for our people, for the country and the world. So again, it's bit.ly/virtual transformations. And I'll make sure that I leave that in the comments or in the description. Okay, so that is all that I have for you today. And what I'll leave you with is just to, continue to be safe out there. And I will look forward to sharing more. We're going to be talking a little bit more about, these unconscious conversations later in the week. So have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week. Namaste.